All right, hello everybody. It is March 14th. This is the steering committee meeting. It's 1:05 p.m. Pacific. Let's see, I'm going to be taking notes, and I don't think we have anybody sort of leading, but I think we have enough critical mass, and we have a couple of topics that folks have been bringing up. So I think we're going to probably make our agenda up as we go. Before we started recording, Brian brought up the issue around sort of repo naming for Kubernetes SIGs. And so I think that'll probably be our first topic of conversation. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, this came up in a bunch of threads once people started using the Kubernetes SIGs, what we had agreed upon in the proposal. Eventually, we discussed different alternatives, multiple orgs, whatever, and we said, well, let's prefix the names of the repos with the SIG names so that they're heavily associated with those SIGs, and we can automate gathering metrics across all the repos for each SIG and things like that. So we have about half a dozen examples now, and from the very first instance, we've been getting complaints about the pattern, that it's too verbose, it's cumbersome for consumers of the repos. If we rename SIGs or merge SIGs or destroy SIGs, then we'll have to rename the repos, and that's disruptive. People have already started abbreviating repos. We used an underscore convention because we thought that was more compatible with Go conventions, but now people are saying it's not compatible. And we already have 2 cases out of 6 where we have mixes of underscores and dashes. So it's kind of turned into a mess pretty quickly. So I had previously suggested as one of the alternates approaches is to use topics to organize the repos instead. So actually associate a topic for each SIG with each repo. I went and did that as an example. So if you go look at the Kubernetes SIGs org right now, the half dozen repos, each one has a topic for each of the SIGs it belongs to. So that makes it super easy to query all the repos that belong to each SIG. And we should be able to get those topics through the GitHub API if we want to automatically associate repos with SIGs and def stats or things like that. Right now, the list is, we have this notion of repository groups that I manually came up with. Once we actually have all of the repos and all of the orgs associated with topics, this is another thing. This will actually work for the repos that are not in Kubernetes SIGs as well. It will work for the ones that are in the Kubernetes org. And we can automate the grouping by SIG.
Sounds great.
I like it.
So this is blocking creation of new repos for API machinery, which would have to both, come up with a new abbreviation like Cluster Lifecycle did, and also would change the names of repos moving from incubator. So I think it's good to drop the prefix.
Is this stuff queryable easily from an API? I guess the one, yeah, I guess it would be the same thing as like listing repos. So it probably comes at the same time, right?
You can click on the topic and it'll give you all the things associated with that.
You can also type
from the GitHub API.
Yeah, you can do both.
Sounds great. The only thought that comes to mind is like we do this and then a bunch of other complaints come back, much like they did with the prefix idea. Is it worth just circulating this and saying this is the plan, or do we just fix it?
This particular issue was actually predicted before, and we've already had a few people suggest alternatives. Other alternatives suggested are just putting the SIG information in other places. And in fact, this is compatible with all those other proposals. Like, it doesn't preclude adding information to YAML file somewhere or READMEs or whatever.
To be clear, I think it sounds great, and I would say I like it and let's do it, but I also can predict that some other set of people will think that we shouldn't do it, and we might be having this conversation again in a month's time. Do we care?
I'm not aware of anyone in support of the prefix.
Why did we do it?
to make progress, to stop arguing about it.
Fair
It
enough.
was the
Okay.
easiest, and we wanted to just kick something out because we were blocking the creation of repos.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it seems reasonable. I think, the only other thing that I would love to do, and I think is I'd love to have every owner's file list the SIG that actually owns that thing in addition to
That's part of the plan.
right. And so if we do that, then the top level owners files of these things will also list the SIG. And so
But that's way harder to query.
yeah, for sure. I mean, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and just from a purely aesthetic point of view, it's kind of useful to have these topics visible. Like when you scan through the list of repos, you can see exactly what they are and who owns them and everything without having to dig into files, owners files, or anything else. But
And by prefix, we mean suffix, right?
All of the repos today are prefixed with the SIG name or an abbreviation of the SIG name.
Oh, the org will remain the same.
The org will remain the same, but we will remove the SIG name prefixes from the repos.
So they still go in Kubernetes SIGs, but no SIG prefix to the.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
All right. Anybody disagree? No? All right. Going once, going twice, sold. All right, who's going to take the action to actually make that happen? Do we have to write it down someplace?
We do have to write it down. We have to change the Kubernetes repositories document and actually rename the repos. I volunteered to rename the repos because I have to go move and create some repos anyway.
awesome.
The Kubernetes org document, you said?
The Kubernetes repositories.md in the community repo is where Brendan created his
Okay. I can
the
update,
repo proposal.
I can update that file.
Cool.
All right. Thank
If we
you.
didn't do it already, we need to gut the incubator.md doc and say now refer to this other doc.
Yeah, I'll do it at the same time.
All right. I'm happy to review. Send it my way. I just implemented Tim Hawkins' Gmail filters. So now I'm going to see stuff that's assigned to me a lot more clearer. I should have done that forever ago. All right. Okay, so that's one topic of discussion. I'm adding another thing on the end here, but the next thing here was the charter approval requirement. So this came up with the Contribec folks, have their charter, and they're like, kind of what next? Do we need to have somebody sort of give this a stamp of approval? Like, how do we signify that the thing's accepted and that it's approved? Is this something where the steering committee plays a role, or is it just sort of like do it and then wait for objections?
I think we have to play a role for two reasons. One is we're trying to make the charters relatively consistent and make sure that certain information is in the charters, and all the charters are new. So we have at least 3 SIGs that I'm aware of, and it's maybe more than that, who have come up with charters in parallel, right? SIG scalability, SIG apps, and SIG contribex. And at least the scalability one was actually created before the charter template and the charter guidelines. So, just from the perspective of making sure the charters are well formed and consistent, we have a role. We need to be responsive though. Like I basically told the scalability people several weeks ago to just wait while we were doing this. Now we've done it. So now kind of the ball's in our court to go give them feedback. The other thing is charters spell out the rules of how the SIG operates, but they also spell out the scope of authority for the SIG. So we actually need to officially say, yes, that scope of authority makes sense. It's not overlapping with this other SIG. You're not overreaching, things like that. So I think,
how do we want to do that? Do we just want to say somebody from the steering committee has to give an approval there? Do we want to take this to a vote to the steering committee? Do we want to do it on email where people say yes to it? How many people need to
I would suggest that not the whole steering committee has to look at every SIG charter, Instead, we would do it. So one thing I wanted out of the KEP process was clear OARP, owners, approvers, reviewers, participants. So I think they should ask for the steering committee to have someone volunteer or to designate someone from the steering committee to be responsible for reviewing it. And we should just let one steering committee member or two or whatever.
All right. So the owner for this stuff is the SIG has to drive themselves, right?
Yes.
So the approver is SIG asks steering for an approver. Reviewer is the SIG members plus rest of the SIG members plus rest of the SIG, or rest of the steering. And then the participants are, you know, community at large. That sound right?
I think so.
Does SIG architecture play a role in the overlapping of responsibilities?
The overlap, what responsibilities each SIG has is a steering committee thing.
Yeah, I don't think we want to turn SIG architecture into a shadow steering committee.
No,
So
Which we could accidentally do if we're not careful.
and if the steering committee sees something in a chart that says, well, is this even really part of the Kubernetes project or not, then they can put that question to SIG architecture.
Okay.
So we at the top of our thing, we ask what is the process? Shouldn't it just be a pull request to a well-defined location? Because right now it's kind of all over the place a little bit inside of the community repo.
No, I think they all have charters, I believe, in a well-defined place in GitHub.
So why would you say PR against the community location of this, subdirectory on this repo?
Charter.md in the SIG's subdirectory in the community repo is where the existing charters are being PR'd to.
Okay, so I think that sounds good. I think there's just a matter of like making sure that we can define some sort of SLO for the steering committee being responsive on reviewing this stuff, so that things don't hang out together. And so I think
I agree.
Exactly.
I think we
patterns there, and then making it clear that we don't have to have everybody in the steering committee approve everything. Just starting the process by saying, here it is. We expect that somebody from the steering committee will step up within the first within a day or two after seeing that email, and then it's up to that person to actually sort of shepherd the thing through. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if we want to do some basic load balancing. We have, I guess, some tens of SIGs now, and they're all going to have to produce new charters in the next while. So we've got however many of us.
I don't know that I would make it random though, because SIG scalability, I just posted the pull request for that one to the chat. Probably some people in the steering committee are more involved with SIG scalability than others. I think it makes sense for them to take a look.
Oh, absolutely. And that's sort of what I was going to suggest, is we just squiz through the list of SIGs and provisionally dole them out and make sure that everybody knows, because I don't want to have to read through all of them and volunteer for every second one. And I see the failure mode here, which is that Brian ends up reviewing 50 SIG charters and then goes and jumps off a cliff. So maybe we want to preclude that.
Yeah, can we just toss them into a spreadsheet?
Good idea.
Yeah,
And have everybody sign up for, however, one over 13.
that sounds perfect. Pick 4 SIGs that you like the most and volunteer to be an approver for them.
Yeah.
All right, I'll create the spreadsheet.
Was that Brennan?
Yeah, it's Brandon.
Okay.
Brandon. That was Brandon.
Brandon, sorry.
At least it wasn't me this time.
Okay, Brandon, what is it? Is it Brandon, your new email? It's not in my autocomplete. Sorry, man.
Brandon.phillips@redhat.com.
Oh, so it's the same thing, just at Red Hat.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, that's the easy to remember version of it. There's some obfuscated, truncated version of it.
Right. Because of Kerberos having a static char array.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
Welcome to Red Hat.
At least
All
it
right,
wasn't
so we
active
also need somebody to document this. We need somebody to document the flow of okay, for a charter update, you have to do X, Y, and Z. That probably goes, do we have Like, do we have like a FAQ or something like that for the charter processes?
We don't.
Surely we could just add that to Phil's document. It seems like a short two-liner to say, once you've read all this, what you need to do is push this over here, and it'll be approved by this, and then it will
Yeah.
go.
All right.
And hopefully once the charters exist, most edits of the charter should not go to the steering committee. It's only things like changing scope of the SIG or something.
Yeah, we might want to say like, hey, any changes to your charter, just give a heads up to the steering committee. And if somebody sort of raises their hand saying, hey, this is something we want to look into, right? So we don't want people sort of sneaking things through. I don't think they would, but it's all undoable.
Bots can also do that, right? We could write a bot to flag all charter.md changes.
At some point, it's like we got enough freaking bots. So does somebody non-Phil want to update Phil's doc? If not, I can sign up to do that.
Well, don't all the people not at the meeting get assigned action items? Isn't that
They don't have the context.
Let's take a vote on that from the people present at the current meeting.
That one should be small. I need to take another run through those because I tuned out during the last call, so I need to do a post last call look at it and see if there's anything I want to actually. So I'll go ahead and assign myself to that. I can tag myself in a comment. All right. All right, that seems doable. Making up the process as we go along. The next topic that I had on here that I added was this idea of SIG membership tracking. And I think I brought this up in the community meeting, and I didn't want to over-represent what was going on there. But by far, in my mind, the most awkward part when we were doing the bootstrap stuff was figuring out who had standing to vote. And that, for me, was incredibly uncomfortable in terms of finding some cut of the community, some way to identify those people. And I assume that, that I'm not alone in that. I want to make sure that when it comes time to vote for the steering committee again, we don't find ourselves in that same position.
I have a proposal already.
Well, that's why I want to make sure that we take this up, and I think it does involve SIGs and all that. So I have an idea also, but I wanted to at least have that conversation, and it's going to take time to get all this stuff down, so I don't want to wait to the last minute for it.
Well, I think it's even partially documented in Phil's SIG template already, which is what I'm advocating is that SIGs should identify additional roles that need to be filled for the SIG. It's like similar to the release team, has a number of roles. So right now, SIGs have chairs, they may have tech leads, there are sub-project owners, approvers, reviewers. All of those people for all sub-projects of that SIG are members of standing for that SIG. But SIGs are free to create additional roles beyond those. So for example, the release team has a number of specific roles. SIG PM is discussing creating a number of roles.
Yeah.
Because I think this is a really good idea for a couple of reasons. One is we can document all those roles the same way as the existing set of roles in owners files and or sigs.yaml. So they'll be actually recorded in a machine scrapable way. Another is we can give more weight to the people who are actually taking the responsibility to do work of all kinds on the project. And third, it provides incentive for SIGs to create concrete roles with specified responsibilities and authority so that we can start having things like job postings across the project, which has been relatively effective for the release team at getting people signed up to do the work, as opposed to just saying, look, we have 4,000 open GitHub issues. It would be great if some people worked on some of those. I think, specifying those responsibilities and giving people, a title that they can claim and making people accountable and all the things like that, I think it'd have huge value across the whole project. Instead of me just occasionally sending a plea saying, help, we need more people to do this to some email thread, we can formalize it.
That sounds super sensible to me, Brian. The one, two minor things that come to mind. The one is that I guess maybe those are, so who gets to vote for a steering committee may be different than who has roles, maybe, or maybe we define those to be equivalent. That if you
I
have a role,
think they should be equivalent. People who are doing actual work, who are participating in the community, and who know who the nominees would be, like, those are the people who should be voting. People
okay,
who,
so maybe we can explicitly state that in principle we want people with the following attributes to have a say, and
people with skin in the
define-
game.
Sorry.
People with skin in the game.
Yeah, we can write 2 sentences describing the nature of the people we want to vote, and maybe a counterexample of the people we don't want to vote. And then we can decide, we can say that our proxy for that at the moment is that anyone who has a role in a SIG gets a vote. The other thing that came to mind briefly was, we have some people who write a large amount of code. They don't necessarily do any of the other roles, and they may not even be involved in the long term. Maybe the latter is irrelevant. But let's say we have somebody who routinely commits a lot of code and gets it merged, and it's all super valuable, but they don't, formally have a role on the SIG. They maybe don't review other people's PRs. They maybe don't, do all the other things. Those would seem like people we would want to have a say, maybe. And
They should sign up. They should be a reviewer. They should sign up to review code.
But maybe they don't. Maybe they just produce large amounts of it.
It's hard to give people that. It's really difficult because some people are sponsored, right? So if you're sponsored by a company, they may not want you spending time doing reviews. Although some people have skin in the game, other sponsored people who, do high-level contributions may not have the fly cover from the organization to be able to do or spend that time doing reviews.
I think
also our automation actually kind of precludes new people from doing reviews, right? Like if the automation isn't assigning you a review, like why are you going to jump in? How are you going to decide which one you should do it? Like I think that's a hard barrier for most people to come across.
Yeah. And maybe this is a corner case. I mean, I don't know if we actually have any real person today who writes large amounts of code and doesn't do any reviews or anything else. So maybe it's sort of academic. But we wouldn't want to prevent those people from having a vote if they do exist.
So I think one example here is that we definitely have people who are part of the organization, because we have that sort of, hey, make me part of the Kubernetes organization, that don't show up in an owner's file anywhere. I'm sure those people exist, right?
Yeah, but that's intentionally made super lax, and some people were even added to the org before we came up with the even lax policy. So,
well, I guess we trust them not to do anything bad, right?
But I think in general, the set of people who are in an owner's file is a dramatic subset of the number of people who even offer a PR, say, once a month.
So
and the number of people who are going to get reviewers are going to be people who are in the owner's file.
Yeah, and I think the language that we use here is confusing to folks also, because right now, being like people celebrate when they actually become a Kubernetes organization member because they're like, oh, now I'm a member of the project. It's like, we're viewing it as like, oh, we're just trust them not to not to graffiti on the walls. But really, I think, people take it more seriously than that. And
we had it in the
well, there's members and then there's members. That sends a really odd message to the community, I think.
So I think for the people who are sending code more than just like one PR, we should find a way to really bring them into the organization to have a bigger impact. And yeah, I agree there are problems with the automation and stuff, but we should fix that problem. I have actually seen people, for example, in SIG CLI, who did just start jumping in and triaging issues and reviewing PRs with no help from automation whatsoever. So it is possible. And those are the kind of people we definitely want to encourage, and we definitely want to get a vote. As for people without error cover, I have much less sympathy for them. Like we should, I think actually, putting in sticks saying, look, if I'm going to have a say, I need to spend time reviewing code, would actually be a good thing in my opinion.
I think that's fine. Like if we wanted to come up, but we should write it down. So like if we had a fact, that said like, how could I demonstrate skin in the game or something like that? And we gave examples and we said like review 5 PRs or review, like there are other ways that you might get selected, but we guarantee that if you do X, Y, Z, you'll be selected. I think that's totally.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Like issue triage, you know, if SIGs want to come up with roles for people who do issue triage, that's a super valuable service to the SIGs and to the whole community. We should define some kind of roles for that and put them in owners files and say, hey, if you do this.
My concern here is that if we delegated all that to the SIGs, we'll have a tragedy of the commons where nobody writes down anything. So I would suggest that someone, whether it's us or whether it's SIG contribx or someone like that, comes up with a generic list, and then SIGs can augment, but that we have some sort of generic list for that we think is universally.
Sounds like a great idea.
I agree.
And I think to get around the prolific coder problem, we can again just leave that up to the SIGs. Each SIG, you know, some SIGs have a greater need for like people writing code than doing all the other stuffs, and vice versa. And if such SIGs want to create a like, you know, prolific coder role and declare that person to have a vote, then that's great.
I think that's an anti-pattern. Like, who's reviewing all that code this prolific coder is writing?
At some point, though, we got to, you know, certain SIGs are going to work certain ways.
That's what I'm saying. Some SIGs might have tons of reviewers and they just need like people to implement stuff, which is hard, and they're happy to do all the reviewing and they can do that, and we won't stand in their way. Other SIGs will be short of reviewers and have too many coders, and they can solve that any way they like.
Let's just think carefully before we encourage people not to reward reviewers. Not.
I don't think Quentin is saying we shouldn't reward reviewers. I think what Quentin is saying is let's make sure we don't punish people who don't do reviews.
Well, so
provided they do other useful stuff.
Right. So maybe what we need is a specified role for those people.
I don't think we need a role. I think we just need like 6 examples, right? Like, and 6 examples of things that we all think are above the bar, and then people can pick and choose what the most useful. Maybe it's triaging, maybe it's reviewing, maybe it's I don't know what else. Like, you know, maybe it's clean.
Yeah. So as long as they get put into some list once the people involved in the SIG have observed them demonstrating that they're doing this stuff, I'm fine with that. I just don't want to have to go reverse engineer what their contributions were, you know, like at the time when some vote somewhere needs to happen.
No, I think it's fine. I think it's like to force them to submit the evidence, right? Like, you know, have this be the escalation path where they say, you know, I want to be a part of the voting. I wasn't selected by whatever automation you built. Here's the 4 PRs that I reviewed. You said that was enough. Make me a reviewer.
So it sounds, we're kind of like going in circles here. I want to maybe stop and recommend that we have a small group of people actually craft a document and work on the document where they can, you know, hash out the potential different roles or different levels of contribution and what are the different stages that we can count people at to allow them to get to vote. Because right now I think we're kind of, you know, throwing ideas out, but we need to really actually have a document, much like we've done with other things around this.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a couple other issues I put on here, and I don't want to discuss these now, but is there a renewal or expiration? How do we actually make sure that we actually get folks who, you know, haven't been contributing for a year and we actually clear those roles? And then SIG stacking. Are we worried about, say, some company being really influential in a particular SIG and just sort of like putting in a ton of people, you know, based on their own definitions?
I was thinking the same thing, just gaming, you know, if we have a somewhat dubious SIG in the first place and then they create 1,000 roles and they get to elect the steering committee.
Well, so this is the problem with numerical things like 4 PRs. Yeah, people send typo fixes and things like that, right?
Yeah, we could just limit the number of roles per SIG, you know. A given SIG can't have more than, you know, N votes or something.
So regardless, I think this is a perfect topic for a smaller group to take off and actually start digging into and writing some proposals around. And again, I'm not going to volunteer Phil again. Poor Phil. I'm happy to actually join the group that's going to go off and talk about this stuff. Are other people want to join in?
Sure, I can do it. I'm not that I necessarily want to be involved, but I feel very conscious that I have not done a lot of concrete stuff yet.
I'll be happy to review it and chime in and comment and help craft it.
So regardless of whether it's the only source of people withstanding, I do want to promote the role idea.
Yeah, I agree.
I think at the end of the day, having, saying that the project is composed of SIGs and only SIGs, and so if you have some role in a SIG, then you have a role in the project. I think creating that level of clarity, I think, will help people out a lot.
Yeah.
So I am comfortable, and I don't think anybody has talked against the idea of saying just project voting and membership, via some level of membership, not the sort of org membership, is the transitive closure of all the SIG committee roles.
Yeah. Just one very brief question, because it might be more broadly interesting than the subgroup that's going to sort this thing out. Do we feel comfortable of having the concept that not all SIGs are equal, or do some SIGs like fundamentally have more members of standing than other SIGs, or do we explicitly want to avoid such a situation?
Well,
No, I think that's maybe inevitable.
yeah, practically speaking, about half a dozen SIGs are where the vast majority of the implementation work happens.
I agree, and I totally agree. I just wanted to make sure that there was no aversion to recognizing this explicitly and saying, like, some SIGs will have way more votes than other SIGs.
There's a Senate versus House thing going on here.
Yes, it is the House of Representatives, not the Senate.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the, whatever the...
Because I don't want to have SIGs break up just so that they can gain the number of votes.
I totally agree. Okay, so we can put that in the doc and say that
I'm more concerned about maybe reviewing some of the SIGs we hear almost never from, about whether they still deserve to be SIGs.
Hunger Games.
Well, we should curate SIGs at the charter level, right?
Yeah,
and
and that would be,
members are members.
Well, the charter exercise alone will be a good indication if their SIG is healthy.
Yeah. Okay, so the action item out of this is a smaller group of people to put together a proposal. This is me, Quentin, and Tim. Anybody else want to raise their hand on this, or just chime in as we get something solid? Okay. All right. I think any other public topics that we all want to cover?
There was one loose end, I think, in our future topics was this whole, oh wait, I deleted it. So there's a dangling issue in our repo about defunct or non-compliant licensed dependencies. I don't know who, there's been a bit of activity, but it's not actually been resolved. Does somebody want to take it to close that out? I think Tim Hockin was the most active participant there. We could ask him to just...
But he's not here, so yes, he'll take care of that.
Well, I mean, rather than somebody who's not been involved up to now climbing in, let's ask Tim. If he doesn't want to do it, then somebody else can step in. I'll chase
yeah,
that.
I think what we're being asked to do is to actually eradicate the code that doesn't meet the licensing standards. CNCF is working on a tool that, and we've done this actually multiple times in the past as well. They just slip through because we don't have continuous testing or monitoring of it. CNCF is working on some kind of continuous monitoring tool, I believe. Ideally, we'd have something we could run on every pull request.
Yeah.
But until we have that, it's going to be a recurring problem, just like it has been over the past 4 years.
I mean, do
Yeah,
we want to deal? Okay,
I've got a feeling that
I didn't want
those...
to deal with ownership around the vendor directory, but like, I guess as we break up repos, that's not going to work. Yeah.
I was just going to make a similar comment. I think the list of non-compliances we have is in the core repo, if I'm not mistaken, and now we've got this explosion of repos, which I presume are subject to all the same problems and probably have way more dependencies.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that it's just not everybody understands all the rules, and it's very hard, especially if you have nested dependencies or whatever,
Yeah, exactly.
to figure out.
Okay, so we'll do a manual cleanup now, but we definitely can't solve this without proper automation.
Yeah, I mean, some of these dependencies have even been things we eradicated in the past, and they've been reinserted.
Oh, like what?
zombie dependencies.
Yeah, like the rate limit one, I think.
Okay, so you've been more in this, but I know Canonical has been they have this LGPL with a carve out for Go static linking. Does that meet our bar or not? And I think YAML and the rate limit, no. So we still don't consider that carve out good enough, huh?
And we can argue with the CNCF and LF lawyers to try to get more exceptions. But yeah, so most of the issues are either with LGPL or the things without a proper open source license.
Like the beer license or whatever, yeah. Send me
do whatever the fuck you want license. I think it's the YAML or the TOML one. That's the TOML one.
I mean, my understanding from the steering committee meeting is that they're fine making exceptions for specific projects. Like, as long as we can defend why.
The governance board?
Yeah.
Well, it needs to meet certain standards, though. Like, it needs to be an OSI approved license. It needs, and do whatever the fuck you want doesn't qualify for that. It needs to not actually be GPL. It needs to.
I think the action should be like either figure out an alternative or talk to the author. Like, I've done this a lot in the past, is just tell the author, like, your core users are about to leave this project if you don't relicense it.
I tried as well, and at least in the 2 cases I tried, it was due to transitive dependencies, and I got no responses in either case. So actually I think it was Containerd or Notary had the same issue. They actually ended up just forking that project and relicensing. I don't know.
Wait.
Don't know if that's how that works, but
yeah. That's not how that works.
Yeah, I mean, I forget the exact situation, but it seems sort of shady. But the LF lawyer signed off on it.
Are there any action items out of this for us, or is it just sort of like Tim, or is there anything that we want to? Because I think I want to get on to other business.
Well, I mean, I think the action item would be if Brian remembers which projects he's already tried to talk to save Tim from backtracking.
But it does sound like we have a long-term problem here. If we don't come up with a scalable solution, it seems like this is just going to keep causing trouble. I mean,
well, yeah, for now we can push back on the CNCF and say we'll do something about it when you have a test to prevent us from having to chase it down again.
Well, so there's 2 problems. The one is, if you have automation and it basically can boot anything that is not strictly compliant, that's one part of the problem. And the other problem is, like, if you allow people to apply for exceptions, like under what case do you grant them and how do you do that, etc. And the latter seems super difficult to do scalably. But anyway, it's too big a topic.
I would recommend we not focus on the exception thing.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah. So in that case,
just make everything comply.
We focus. Yeah, you just don't allow in dependencies that are not compliant. That was sort of where I was leading to, and then it's just an automation problem.
Yeah. I don't think dealing with exceptions is manageable for us.
I agree. Having spent last week with a lot of Linux Foundation lawyers, I have full appreciation of quite how big that problem is.
All right, so I want to carve out some time for some other topics here. Can we spend 5 minutes on, Tim put a topic on here around face-to-face KubeCon EU agenda, and then I think we probably want to go off the record, and Michelle wanted to talk about code of conduct stuff, and so let's have the committee there, and so we'll have a private discussion around that. So can we talk about the face-to-face KubeCon EU stuff and time box that? The action item coming out of the previous one is Brian trying to remember that stuff, and then, like, as you know, folks who deal with the CNCF regularly, like Brian and Michelle and what have you, just say, hey, if you're going to put requirements on us, it has to come with tools. I think that's pretty much the feedback there.
Yeah, I've asked Chris for tools before. I'll follow up on the timeline.
Okay. Okay, so the face-to-face stuff, Tim, what were you thinking there?
I was just asking a question. If there's going to be enough critical mass at KubeCon EU, if we should set aside time and venue and location to chat, and are there any topics that we want to bring up during that time?
Is there anyone on this call who's not going to Copenhagen?
I am probably not going to go. I haven't fully decided, but I'm probably not going to go. But I'm happy to pull a Derek and dial in.
Michelle, we can barely hear you, by the way. It was really difficult to hear you. Sorry.
I will.
Oh, that's better.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, so I just wanted to know who wasn't going. So I counted 3 people on this call who weren't going. So maybe we should just, on the mailing list, see who's going. I thought the face-to-face last time was very helpful. I thought we got a lot done. So I'm for it.
Yeah, I'll be there and I can make it. I think we should just say we're going to get together irrespective of how many people are there. And if we can't get quorum, then we can't make any like final decisions, but we should still just have a get together.
Yeah,
We can still take notes. We just can't assign or take action, right? So
although to counterpoint, KubeCon North America, my agenda was just filled with meetings, and the steering committee meeting was only one of many meetings, and I felt like that significantly detracted from the value of the conference for me. So I would just keep that in mind. It's an opportunity. We actually meet every 2 weeks, at least for those of us who show up on the call. The conference is an opportunity to actually engage with other people that you wouldn't normally engage with.
That's awesome. Maybe we should think about having a separate thing to meet if we wanted to do that.
Yeah, face-to-face that's not tied to the conference. Yeah, I would be on board with that.
I mean, just as a kind of counterpoint. So I was at the previous one and I wasn't able to make the steering committee face-to-face and I just didn't, and that's fine. And I think the same should apply to any one of us at any time, that, you know, not all of us are going to be able to make it either because we're not there or because we're double booked or whatever. So yeah, everybody has to decide for themselves what are the most important things to do during the time they have to go there.
All right, so somebody want to take an action item to try and get a room and a time and all that figured out?
why don't we start with an email to the list, and then see who will be there. And if critical mass is achieved and people want to, then we can try to talk to Dan about getting a separate room set aside.
You can send that mail.
I can do that.
All right. Okay. What year? I'm so confused.
So do you want to stop recording? Is that what it is?
Yeah, no, I just went to, I went to add Tim and he wasn't already on the share for this. All right, he is now. Okay. Yeah, so I will go through and so I'm going to conclude the recording here, and then we're going to be talking about some code of conduct stuff that Michelle wanted to start talking about. So, all right. Thank you, everybody watching at home. Thank you for slogging through 40 minutes of us droning on. So I'm going to stop now.